Hi, we're live. Welcome to the Own Your Expertise interview series. This is the very first installment episode that I've done live, and I'm super excited to be here with my guest, Christina Marie Noel, today. So if you're out there listening, feel free to drop me a comment. Let me know you're there just to say hi. It's always fun when, I'm sitting here, feel like I'm talking to myself. Well, I feel like I'm talking to Christina, but I know you guys are out there listening. So definitely pop in, say hi, let us know who you are, where you're from, where you're located, and, what you do, whatever you want. Feel free to use that as a little bit of promotion for yourself. We're all about marketing here. So I'm Emily Crookston. I am the owner and decider of all things at The Pocket PhD. I'm the ghostwriter for Rebels, Renegades, and Mavericks, and I really love helping experts get their big ideas out of their heads and into the world. So I love doing these interviews with different experts in my network. So if you want to be interviewed by me, hey, drop me a line, let me know. Happy to jump on live with you and chat with you the same way that I do with my other interviewees. So today I'm here with Christina Marie Noel. Like I said, she's the founder of Noel Co, which is a marketing and strategy consultancy. Christina is also the founder of a really cool program. It's called the FYSO Accelerator program. And FYSO, F-Y-S-O, stands for Figure Your Shit Out, which I just love as a name, such a brilliant name to come up with. But it's an accelerator program that gives mission-driven founders a safe space and community to test out their ideas. So it's really for early-stage mission-driven founders, and it's a really great program, and Christina will tell you all about it, I'm sure. But go ahead, Christina, let us know who you work with. Tell us a little bit more about who you work with.
Oh, yeah. Don't you love that question? It's like, what do you do?
Right.
Well, I do lots of things. I mean, first and foremost, I'm really a social entrepreneur. I've been working in social entrepreneurship for more than 8 years now, and I've helped more than 50 mission-driven organizations on marketing and strategy. And from that, it's so interesting because 8 years ago, my ultimate dream was to build a social enterprise of my own. And what ultimately happened, though, is leading up to it, everything with entrepreneurship for me was exciting. Like, I went and got my MBA, and that was super supportive. Then I got really involved in startup weekends and running entrepreneurial programs, and I loved it. And then I quit my job, and I was miserable.
And you were working for a mission-driven business, right? Social cause business, yeah.
Yeah. So I had an entrepreneurial job. And so I was like, all right, I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to build my own business. And where I landed was that it's really two things. So I work with two different types of companies, but I do pretty much the same thing. So Noel Co, as you mentioned, is my marketing and strategy consultancy. With that, I do a lot of one-on-one marketing strategy, helping organizations go to market and determine how to best use their marketing dollars. My why for everything that I do is that I want mission-driven organizations to grow and thrive and to create amazing jobs. And the only way you're going to do that is if you have the right business model and you grow. And so a lot of my consultancy is about helping organizations grow. But then figure your shit out really comes from what I was just talking about, which is creating community and support for early stage entrepreneurs. I'm a huge believer in the power of community. And also, entrepreneurship is really messy. And so if you're going to build a company with a sustainable business model, it just takes time and testing and humility and lots of figuring your shit out.
Yeah.
So if we're going to have this new successful generation of mission-driven companies, we've got to make sure that they have the tools and the support that they need to succeed. And so that's what I'm doing.
Yeah, I love it. It's just you created the thing that you needed, right? You're here's what I need. Let me create it for all these other people. That's so cool.
True entrepreneurship, right? You see a problem and...
Right. And what I also love is that through the marketing strategy and consultancy, which I should say, full disclosure, I'm a total fangirl client. I love Christina's marketing strategy. It's so helpful. She's the reason we're here. Let's be honest. She's the one who first suggested the Own Your Expertise interview series and, increasing brand awareness on LinkedIn, all part of my marketing strategy that I worked out with her. So that's really cool. But what I love is that you can work with business owners and entrepreneurs at pretty much all stages, because with the marketing consultancy, you can work with folks like me who have a sort of established business or they've been in business for a while. But you can also work with the early stage entrepreneurs, especially mission driven, but not necessarily, limited to mission driven business owners. So that's a great, you're really spanning a great range there of different people. So that's cool.
Well, and you make a good point too. My definition of, mission driven is like definitely a spectrum. And I'm a big believer that like, I want to work with you if you believe business is about more than making a profit, period. Yeah. Right. And then from that, we can decide, like, there's a continuum of like, I might have some social responsibility and I want to like build my community, all the way to like, I'm a B Corp. I help people. Like, that's number one. And then profit just makes that possible. And I mean, each organization has to figure out like what makes most sense for them. And I love that too, like helping. I mean, because you make a huge impact. I love that you're like, you are literally helping people translate their expertise and get the word out. And I mean, talk about a gap in the marketplace. We have all these amazing experts and they're not sharing their knowledge.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. You're right. I don't like typically, identify as a social cause business because, and I think that this is a point that you just made in your newsletter just recently, right? It's that we think, oh, social cause, that means no profits. Or social entrepreneurs means you're running a nonprofit and you're doing everything bootstrapped and you have no money and you're just trying to get by, right? And it's so important to realize that if you want to make an impact, you want to change the world, you have to also fill your bank account first. Your bills have to be paid before you can help anybody change the world. So there's no reason why these things have to be mutually exclusive, right? And I think that that's something that newer social entrepreneurs are waking up to in a way that maybe my generation, right, as Gen Xers, never really thought of those two things as being compatible, right? So
yes, they totally are. And here's the thing, like, I am so pro money, especially from a job standpoint. Like, you're not going to create great jobs if you don't have resources to pay people well. If you're like understaffed because you don't have money to invest, then people are going to be run ragged. And so like, I am pro money. Like, you can't, no money, no mission.
Right. Yes. Well, yeah. And, coming from an academic background where it almost felt like a nonprofit, like lots of people talked about how being a professor is a vocation. So you shouldn't expect to get paid for it. And I've always thought that was such bullshit.
Why? You have expertise.
Yeah.
Like, why?
And, I understand like capitalism, whatever. We can talk about the evils of capitalism all day long if we want to. But at the end of the day, you've got bills to pay. And you're right. Absolutely. If you want to support your employees in the right way, you've got to figure out how to pay them. And that means figuring out how to make sure you're getting the profits that you're looking for, like having a budget, figuring out how to run the business in a businessy way, not just hope for grants or whatever, right? Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. So tell us a little bit more about your path to becoming the expert that you are today. Tell us about your journey.
I love talking about my origin story because it starts at a bar.
Love it. Right.
Isn't it like the start of any like real story?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I had graduated in 2008 when the market crashed.
Awesome. Good timing. Yes.
So great. I know. I'm that millennial who like grew up when it's like, we have not had it easy. We graduated in a market crash. I grew up with parents who are very like financially conservative. They really value stability. And I got my first job. I was a healthcare consultant. And I remember thinking, I'll help hospitals. That has some purpose to it.
Right.
I would describe my job. I used to describe my job as like putting a Band-Aid on a hemorrhage.
Right.
like we did important work, but it wasn't the right job for me. It wasn't the right fit. I learned a ton. And I mean, that happens to so many of us, right? Like we find ourselves in this place where we're like, oh, this is not what I want to be doing. But it's really like when you're in that space, it's really hard to know what's next. So I'm at a bar with my friend. I'm like, I don't know what I want to do with my life. I'm stuck. And, I know I'm not happy. I know I have to make a change, but what is that change? And that's when my friend asked me this question and they said, Christina, what would you do if you didn't have to worry about money?
Mm.
And I was like, oh. I had, up until that point, I never, ever even thought of that as a question.
Yeah, sure.
Of course you have to worry about money. Like, money is important. And I'm still care and worry about money.
Yeah, right.
However, that question's about what would you do if you weren't afraid? And the minute I was asked it, I knew the answer. I was like, I want to make an impact. I want to help people. And if we're going to be so bold, like, I want to change the world. I'm the ultimate idealist.
I love it.
And it was terrifying, but like, it was that day that I made a decision that I'm going to figure this out. I don't know how I'm going to make a living, making an impact, but I'm going to figure it out. One of my first strategies was I was like, oh, I'll go get my MBA. At least that way I can like run a nonprofit.
Right. So many people do that. They're like, oh, I can't find a job, or, oh, I don't know what to do next, so I'll go to grad school, or I'll go and get a master's. Like, let's just keep doing school. I like it. Right. Well, I mean, you had some strategy behind it, not to say you were just like,
well, it's a good transition point, right?
Yeah,
so,
totally. Yeah.
I was going from like traditional consulting to like, I want to change the world. That's kind of a bit of a leap. And on top of it, I knew, and what's so funny is I knew that I also wanted to go from consulting to really like something more creative, i.e. marketing. Look at that.
Yeah.
And the cool thing is, so I started doing researching MBA programs, and that's when I stumbled upon social entrepreneurship.
Oh, interesting.
And I was like, oh, wait, you can have a business and like change the world and, really like build this life and make a huge impact through capitalism. And like, I was blown away. And so what's so cool is the minute you know what you want to do, you just need to start talking about it, even if it feels weird. And so the first networking event I went to a women's entrepreneurship networking event, and this woman introduced herself and was like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, I want to be a social entrepreneur. And she's like, oh, that's great, because I am one. You should come work with me.
Yes. Great lesson.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah. I always encourage people, if you're thinking about writing a book, start talking about it. Like, people are like scared to say what their idea is, but you totally talk to people about it, because they're going to ask you questions that you hadn't thought of. They're going to say, oh, by the way, I, just wrote a book, and here's what I did, or in your case, oh, I'm a social entrepreneur. Why don't you come work for me?
Yes, I know. And then what's crazy, and like the story can go a little bit faster from there. So like I worked with this one social entrepreneur, and that led to this life-changing internship with B Lab, the nonprofit behind a global B Corp movement. Right. And I spent a summer auditing 10 different mission-driven companies. And then I went and got a job at one of the B Corps. And then I built our local B Corp community, and I volunteered all the time. I became MVP of the B Corp movement. I'm still pretty much obsessed with the B Corp movement. And then, before you know it, 8 years later, you've worked with 50 mission-driven organizations. Right. Like you woke up and you're like, oh, look at this life that I've created for myself. How cool is that?
Yeah. I mean, your story just tracks with so many other stories I've heard from experts, where it's like, there's the lesson. It's not linear. Here's the lesson. You don't know where you're stepping when you take the next step. You don't know what that's going to lead to. So, just stop trying to reverse engineer your life, because, by the way, you're on a path, and so many, variables are there that you can't even predict where you're going to be in 10 years. But if you follow the dream, right? If you follow your instincts and you follow what you want, right? You said, I was miserable, and so I needed to change, so I'm in the bar. And, and then it leads to this question that changes your life, I mean, you can't predict this kind of stuff, right? So
and at every point along the way too, it was just following my interests. Like,
right.
I did a project with this really cool nonprofit. I was working with our local United Way to like have an innovation challenge to stop childhood hunger, right?
Right.
It's so interesting that if you follow that interest, you'll keep meeting people that lead you in different directions. And before you know it, you've built this expertise.
Yeah. Very cool. I love that story. Okay, so this is one of my favorite questions. What's your die in a ditch belief? So I talk about this concept of a die in a ditch belief, which is basically something that you would be willing to defend if you were pressed. So most people, I would say, have like one or two big die in a ditch beliefs. Like, I've known this since I was 4 years old, right? I've known this my whole life. This is a thing that, if I know anything for sure, this is the thing. It could be controversial. It could be a little disruptive. But whatever it is, it draws a line in the sand for you. And I just loved Christina's answer to this question when I asked you originally. We've talked about this a few times before. So what's your die in a ditch belief, Christina?
My die in a ditch belief is if you want to change the world, or if that's a little too much for you, if you want to make an impact, do not do it alone. You cannot see the forest from the trees. And that doesn't sound that controversial, right? Like the idea of collaboration feels good to people in theory, but in reality, like our society celebrates the lone genius. They celebrate Steve Jobs, who created Apple. Mm-hmm. Well, Steve Jobs was an amazing brand expert, right? But there is no Steve Jobs without Steve Wozniak. There's no Steve Jobs without an incredible team and amazing collaborators who also let him get away with taking a lot of the credit, right? Like the reason Steve Jobs is so celebrated is Steve Jobs made sure Steve Jobs was given the credit. Yeah. And that's just it. Yeah. Like he did change the world, but so did everyone that worked with him. And he was smart enough to know he had to surround himself with people, and you have to do the same. And I mean, there's like so many ways to go about that, right? Like you don't necessarily need a partner. It can be a community. You can, find people. I mean, the key is just finding people that believe in you and are going to support you and are going to collaborate with you or investing in support. But do not do it alone.
Yes, I like that a lot. So I think in another important point about it is I think we should change the perception around what it means to work with someone else, right? Because I think a lot of people, and you're totally right that we have this individualistic culture, every man for themselves kind of, and I think because of that, in a lot of ways, it's weakness, it's vulnerability if you admit that you need a community or you need a partner to help you with your business, right? I mean, I think there's something important here that shows why every mastermind group I've ever been in is all women entrepreneurs, right? And there's women I think are so much more collaborative, maybe by nature, than men. I don't know. I hate to make like lots of gender pronouncements, but I this is like an observation, right? There's something about there's vulnerability involved when you look to a community to support you, right? And I think that's a perception that we could change, right? It doesn't diminish me to mastermind with you once a week and talk through my shit so that you can, get it out of my head, right? Like that makes me more powerful, not less, right?
Yes. Like it's really powerful to get support. And when it is hard too, because in the small business community, there is a lot of BS advice that's being peddled where it's like, hustle all the time. Yeah. You just work. And I'm like, is that strategic? Or could you, find a mastermind and, think about your strategy. And then you can also have a life.
Right? Yes, right. You don't have to like make $1 million tomorrow or next week, or next year, right? You can build to $1 million in 5 years or 10 years. Fine. You can go at your own pace. And by the way, if you do that, you're going to have more longevity. You're not going to burn out. You're going to be able to have a life. You're going to, we all got into entrepreneurship because we wanted control over our time, right? So why become like controlled by your time management system because you've decided you need 10 things on your to-do list when really you need 3 things on your to-do list.
and are there things on your to-do list that you're doing that you're not good at? So nobody's good at everything. Like everybody has blind spots. Everyone struggles with things. And so it's like, can you find support that will fill in those gaps in your knowledge, that will support you, and then in turn, like pay off in a big way?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the key to scaling, right? You've got to figure out what you can get off your plate. So in fact, working with other people is the path to wild success and fame and money and everything you want. Right?
I mean, and happiness, right? Like
and happiness. Oh, right, that thing.
oh yeah, that thing. What? We're talking about money here.
Right. I'm on a money train today. I'm like, money. But yeah, totally. Yes, I really like that. If you want to change the world or make an impact, right? You have to do it with other people. You can't do it alone. That's great. Yeah. So let's talk. I think we've talked a bit about how you learn to translate your expertise for others, but do you have more to say about that?
I'm a marketing storyteller, so
yeah, right. We can get back to that, like what you actually do. Yeah.
This feels like a good space for me to be. If you're trying to translate your expertise, it really helps to be different and authentic. And it's also really important to speak to one person in such a way that like they feel like you get them. And so a great example of that in my life is arguably the best strategic decision I've ever made is that I called my accelerator program Figure Your Shit Out.
Right.
It 100% started as a joke. My friend actually, I can't even take full credit. My friend who's a graphic designer, I was like with her, I was like, there's this resource and we need it and I'm going to pull it together and we're going to figure our shit out. And she was like, you should call it that.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. I'll keep that in mind. And so then I was launching it and I made a joke. I'm like, we're going to figure our shit out. And then I put like a little star and I'm like, until I rebrand it into something more appropriate. And
that never happened.
No, because what happened is the entrepreneurs that I piloted the program with were like, you cannot change that. Like, we love this. We want to come figure our shit out. Like, that's what we're doing. And then what's so crazy is it led to really speaking to the people who need it, who are like, I'm so tired of the BS. I just want a safe space. I just want people who are honest and humble and like actually willing to like come and show up and be vulnerable. And I'm so thankful it did that. At the same time, though, being different and even being authentic is terrifying. Like everyone in marketing is like, be different.
It sounds right? Yeah.
It sounds so simple and obvious, but it actually is like scary because I am one part definitely rebel. Like I've owned that, like there's definitely rebel in me, but I'm also a recovering people pleaser. And so while this name is totally authentic, there's so many times I've thought, like I remember going to networking events and I'd be like, hi, I run this marketing consultancy and the FYSO Accelerator. And somebody would be with me and be like, what does that stand for, Christina? And I'm like, figure your shit out. And the reason I felt shy about it is because I worried that I'm like, is someone not going to take me seriously because of this edgy name? And here's the thing. Yes, there are going to be some people who hear that I run the Figure Your Shit Out Accelerator program and they're not going to take me seriously. And it might offend some people because they don't like the word shit.
Right.
But here's the thing. It's not for them. It's not for them. It's authentic to who I am. If you are for everyone, you are truly for no one. And so you have to like own who you are, own it well. And, and you start seeing where this works in so many different ways. Like Brene Brown.
Right.
The people who love and obsess with Brene Brown talk about her all the time. But there are still some people who like are not on the Brene Brown train. I don't know that you can actually not like her.
Right. She's very likable, for sure.
She's very likable.
Clearly knows a lot of stuff. Yeah, totally.
But still, like, there's still people who are not yet ready.
It's not everyone's vibe. It's not everybody's cup of tea, right? And that's right. I mean, this to go back to the die in a ditch belief. I mean, that is the epitome of figuring out who your tribe is, right? Once you can list those die in a ditch beliefs, it's a real simple sorting situation where the people who read your headline or they read your die in a ditch beliefs when you put them out there and they're like, oh yeah, you're not for me. Great. Then, it's good to know that now before we're halfway through a project and realize we're not a good fit. Right. So there's like no shame and no problem with forging your path that way, rooting out the people who aren't, in your tribe that way. So yeah, that's what I really like that advice. I mean, I use that advice when I'm thinking about writing content, when I'm talking to people about their content, right? Think about yourself writing to a particular person, talking to your patients. If you're, a physical therapist trying to write a book or a psychologist trying to write a book, think about yourself with your patient in your office, right? Make it as real as possible. And in fact, talk to some of those people if you can, so that you can figure out what lights them up, because that's who you're writing to ultimately. So yeah, such a great marketing tip. Like, think about one person, or think about a small group of people you're writing to. Yeah. And those people will find you. It's like magic, right?
Yes. And don't be boring. I mean, you're not boring in any way, shape, or form. But I mean, we are bombarded with content and advertising messages. We don't have time. We're very busy. Like, we're in a very busy point in society. And so, like, cut the really boring corporate writing. It's
Yeah. If you sound like everyone else, why should someone pick you over the competition, right? Exactly. Yeah. Stand out as much as you can. And I think you're right. That goes back to authenticity. And it takes time to figure out what that brand is, who you really are, so that you can get there. But it's so worth it, right? I mean, that's what a good marketing strategist will tell you. Absolutely. Awesome. Very cool. I love it. All right. So I think we have done really, I think this has been awesome. I want to thank you so much again for being my guinea pig to sit down with me and do this live. You're awesome. I love you. Thanks so much for sitting down with me. Why don't you tell us where we can learn more about you?
Oh, well, I love that I'm like, well, okay.
So on LinkedIn, obviously, because we are on
LinkedIn. There's a LinkedIn profile, Christina Marie Noel. I have two different websites. So I have one website that's my name, www.ChristinaMarieNoel.com. That's where my coaching, speaking, and then FYSO lives. And then I do have my more corporate, traditional noelandco.io.
Right.
My techie website for my one-on-one consulting. You got to meet people where they're at. I show both sides to all people, but still it's nice to make them feel comfortable. Cool. And then I highly recommend, if you're a founder, that you go to bit.ly/FYSO guide, FYSO GUIDE. I swear I can spell. I wrote a 101 page manifesto on the things you should be thinking about to build and grow a business. And if that's really intimidating, I know you probably don't have time to read all 101 pages. I also, if you sign up, get on my newsletter, at least stay for the 5 emails where I point out the key points. So
yes.
I also promise not to spam you.
Cliff notes, right? You give them the cliff notes in the email.
Exactly. The key points that are not always obvious. And and I also promise not to be too spammy. I swear.
Cool.
I'm a relationship-based marketer.
Yeah, there you go. Another good tip, relationship-based marketing. Yes. No, that's great. The FYSO guide is amazing. It really is comprehensive, 100-some pages of everything you need to know. And if you're starting out, there's no better crash course in starting a business as a mission-driven entrepreneur, business owner. So I've read it, and I wasn't even in the starting phase of my business, and I learned a ton. So definitely check that out. Jump on Christina's newsletter. I'm sure you can find all that info on one of her 2 websites. But look for the FYSO Accelerator, and keep an eye on Christina. Watch her newsletter, and you'll get all the dirt. You'll get all the info. So that's awesome.
Totally.
All right, cool. Thanks, everybody. Hopefully, everyone was watching on LinkedIn there. Hopefully, you got some great ideas out of this. And let me know in the comments. Let me know in my profile, my feed, and LinkedIn that you're around, that you're listening. And if you want to be interviewed by me for the Own Your Expertise interview series, let me know. You can find me. So thanks, everybody. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks.